Sword of Coming EP19, word deep dive, a deceptive sacrifice? No, they're each other's sanctuary. The following is a comprehensive narrative reconstruction of the events and deep lore analysis surrounding the 19th chapter of this chronicle. The weight of this history is immense, a 9,000-word analysis distilled into the turning of a page. It is a tale defined by the stratagem of, the plum tree dying for the peach, a maneuver that reverses the karma of a week and brings about a long-awaited reunion amidst the vastness of mountains and rivers. Here, the bright moon is reflected upon the mountain waters, and a youth's original heart, once fractured by the jagged edges of regret before a lonely grave, is finally mended. It is a shared gaze between emerald peaks, where the spring breeze lingers eternally in a world of jade. Without further ado, let us dive right into the heart of the matter. The story begins with the matriarch of the Li family within the Liju Grotto Heaven. On a particular New Year's Eve, following a long-established tradition, she uses the recitation of idioms as a pretext to distribute lucky money to the children and servants of the household. One might wonder why the Li family employs such a specific method to motivate their kin. Beyond showcasing a refined family style and demonstrating kindness to their subordinates, it is a calculated effort. They utilize the constant dripping wears away the stone approach to slowly accumulate the literary aura of the Li family. In the world of Jian Lai, one must not obsess over how many idioms are required to cultivate such an aura. It is a tangible phenomenon, a matter of degree and persistence. The plum tree dies for the peach, one voice recites. The matriarch's reaction is instantaneous. Nonsense, she erupts, her anger flaring at the sound of the idiom. She then turns her gaze toward the study of her eldest son, Li Shixing, her eyes filled with a mysterious and complex intensity. To understand the roots of her rage, one must delve into the hidden truths of the past. The idiom itself originates from the Music Bureau collection, the peach grows upon the well and oppos's edge, the plum tree stands by its side. Insects come to gnaw the peach and oppos's root, the plum tree dies in its place, Literally, it describes the plum sacrificing itself for the peach, a metaphor for substitution or taking the blame for another. However, when applied to Li Shixing, the idiom is reversed, the peach dies for the plum, In this inversion, the peach tree perishes so the plum tree may flourish, receiving the blessings and grace intended for another. In this world, the plum, is Li Shixing. The peach, is Chen Ping'an, the youth seen holding a peach branch in the earliest days of this journey. Thus, the peach dies for the plum, signifies that Li Shixing has received the providence and grace that originally belonged to Chen Ping'an. The origin of Li Shixing's name provides the first clue. Shixing, aspiring to sainthood, is an allusion to the Three Kingdoms period, specifically Li Kangzhon fate, which notes that Meng Ke and Sun Qing aspired to be saints, walking the righteous path with ease, refusing to be mere followers. Fan Zhongyan's memorials similarly describe disciples of the saints who walk the path of righteousness. Li Shixing is indeed a disciple of a saint, but of which religion? Judging by his Taoist divine powers, he is the first disciple of the Taoist ancestor. This disciple, in his pursuit of unifying Confucianism, Buddhism, and Taoism, transformed one breath into three purities, walking the world in three incarnations. Li Shixing is his Confucian manifestation. By rights, Li Shixing should never have appeared in the Li family of Liju Grotto Heaven. He was intended by the Taoists of the Qiming world to be placed within the Chen family of the pure Confucian lineage in the Qinghao kingdom of Beiju Luzhou. His name should have been Chen Shixing. Conversely, the true eldest son of the Li family should have followed the naming convention of his siblings, Li Baoping and Li Baozhen, and been named Li Baozhou. The mastermind behind this plum for peach Swap is the big senior brother, Chen. His scheme was to use the connection between Li Baoping and Baoping Isle to secure a, possibility, for the future. He foresaw the day the demon race would invade in force, when the Howran world would make its stand at Baoping Isle. When the mountains and rivers of the isle were on the brink of collapse, would Li Shixing, as Li Baoping's elder brother and the great headmaster of the Qiming world, step in to save his sister and the world? What choices would the second headmaster Yudo or the third headmaster Luchan of the White Jade capital make then? Would the Taoist ancestor himself make an exception for his first disciple? This is the profound underlying reason for the swap. On the surface, one must ask how Li Shixing obtained the luck belonging to Chen Ping'an. Within the Lizhu Grotto heaven, there were two Chen lineages. One moved away long ago to the Pasua world, the Yin-style Chen family of Chen Dui. The other is Chen Ping'an's lineage. Today, Chen Ping'an is the sole survivor. The rest of his kin have been reduced to servants and maids for the 4 major surnames and 10 clans, no longer maintaining their own households. For dozens of generations, he alone struggled in the town without falling into slavery. In a place of such immense providence as the Grotto Heaven, such a perpetual state of misfortune is unnatural. It was manipulated. Someone consolidated thousands of years of Chen family providence, preparing for a massive payoff, intended for the sole survivor, Chen Ping'an. It is highly likely that high-level members of the Yin-style Chen family, perhaps involving the sugar-coated Ha's alliance, set this game in motion over 2 millennia ago. They concentrated the providence on Chen Ping'an not to help him, but to prepare to replace him. However, the descent of the Taoist Chen Shixing and Cui Chan's intervention caused a shift. Chen Shixing, who possessed Chen blood, was swapped with Li Baozhou. Because Chen Ping'an's life porcelain was shattered, he could not hold his luck. The providence naturally grafted itself onto the only other person in town with Chen blood who was not a slave, the renamed Li Shixing. If the Yin-style Chen family ever discovered that their thousands of years of planning had benefited a Taoist incarnation instead of their own, they would be utterly drained by the irony. From these events, it is clear that Li Shixing is not the Li matriarch's biological son. Her true son is Li Bao'o in Beiju Luzhou. She may not know Li Shixing's true identity, but she knows he is not hers, which explains her complex, often resentful feelings toward him. Caught in the schemes of such powerful figures, she can do nothing but take her anger out on the servants. Regarding the Kai tree on the ancestral grave visited by Chen Dui, it appeared because of the combination of Chen Ping'an's luck and Li Shixing's Chen family blood. Without both elements, the tree would never have manifested. Returning to the present, the landscape of power continues to shift. Weibo has moved to Pingyun Mountain, the highest peak after the landing of Lizhu Grotto Heaven. The Great Li Empire deemed this peak not for sale and Weibo's residence there signals the immense importance placed upon him, thanks in no small part to Aliang. Rogue cultivators now whisper of Mountain Lord ways friendship banquet noting that congratulatory gifts must be prepared a decade in advance to be worthy of the table. Luapa Mountain is becoming a place of life. From now on, Chen Ping'an declares, Luapa Mountain is half your home. Stay as long as you like, You Haven and Oppos, tea changed, comes the reply. That and Oppos, good. Now that you and Oppos, V returned from your travels, you are still Chen Ping and Oppos, While others like Xiao and Li Shixing claim he has an Oppos, tea changed, Chen Ping'an's life is in constant flux. On Jilin Peak, the Luapa Mountain God Temple and the Mingzi Building have been established. The mountain god is Song Yizhang, who died heroically in the service of Great Li. His appointment serves as a way for the empire to monitor Chen Ping'an, the mountain lord, a price to be paid for his position. The Mingzi building itself is constructed from Frenyong bamboo from the bamboo sea grotto heaven, a descendant of one of the 10 ancestral bamboos. Though inferior to the ancestor, it nourishes the soul and physique of martial artists. Soon, someone end quote. Not quite he has walked for a long time, but the end is not yet in sight. End quote. While parents are alive, one does not travel far, end quote, the old saying goes. But when parents are gone, home is gone. Every step in the world is a journey into the distance. Though he wears new clothes and tells his parents he is doing well, the loneliness and sorrow accumulated since the age of 5 cannot be so easily filled. Those two nameless graves were built in his heart, layer by layer, over a decade. Each handful of soil is a piece of longing gathered into burial mounds. And from the day he learned the truth, that his father had survived as a shadow god, the weight of his path only grew heavier. The young man's heart was filled with an endless, soaring anticipation, a hope that reached toward the heavens. But then came Old Man Yang's words, 3 simple syllables that shattered the silence. End quote. Not worth it, end quote. In their literal sense, the words seemed light, almost ephemeral, yet they weighed as heavy as the celestial mountains and the silver moon within Chen Pingan's heart. They bore down with such force that they nearly crushed the small mountain he had painstakingly built within his own soul. Instantly, his vision blurred. He was forced to look down at his feet, his eyes brimming with hot, uncontrollable tears. Old Man Yang's cold assessment forced the boy to see reality with a brutal clarity. He was, in the end, just a mud-legged commoner who had stumbled blindly into a stroke of fortune. He was and Oppos, T. Worthit and his parents, in the eyes of the world, were even less worthy of any divine favor or celestial intervention. Yet, the measure of whether something is end quote, worth it end quote, is not a decree for others to decide, it is a choice only he can make for himself. In the distant future, upon the soil of the Tongya continent and at the mist-shrouded Feiying Ferry, Chen Pingan would prove to dozens of versions of himself that every hardship was indeed worth it. Only after experiencing those grueling trials, and only after making the difficult choices of what he deemed truly valuable, would the boy finally transcend his youth. On the day Chen Pingan truly returns home to start his own family, he will finally possess the courage to stand before his parents and Oppos, grave and say, end quote, Father, Mother, I am truly doing very well. Look, who is this beside me? It is your wonderful daughter-in-law, Ningyao, end quote. At that time, Ningyao will also bring a handful of soil, fresh earth from another world. It is a scene that remains far in the distance, something for which we must wait a very long time to witness. It cannot be helped. The road home for a wanderer is inherently rugged, winding, and fraught with difficulty. Chen Pingan has already walked this road for 10 years, and he is destined to walk it even longer and further into the unknown. Fortunately, he carries his beloved in his heart, and the gentle spring breeze remains a constant companion by his side. In the shifting scene, an untimely winter descends once more. The spring breeze carries fallen leaves to Chen Pingan's side, where they land quietly beside the bamboo slips inscribed with the wish, end quote, safe and sound year after year, end quote. The leaves gently brush away the ripples of sorrow in the boy's heart, mirroring a scene from the seasons past. One might even say that these are the spirits of Chen Pingan's parents watching over him from the void. Sensing the spring breeze, the flowers, and the drifting leaves, they reach out to smooth their son and Oppos' furrowed brow, whispering to his soul, end quote, Pingan, you are not alone. Walk forward boldly, we have always been by your side, end quote. Memory flickers back to a simpler time. End quote, son, end quote, a voice asks. End quote, yes, end quote, the young Pingan replies. End quote, after the new year, will you be a grown-up, end quote, his father asks. End quote, Father, I'm 5 years old by nominal age, end quote, the boy answers with pride. End quote, I'm a grown-up now, end quote, his father's voice turns solemn. End quote, then if father is no longer here, I'll have to leave your mother in your care. Can you do that, end quote, I can, end quote, the boy declares. End quote, come, end quote, his father smiles, end quote, let's pinky swear. Pinky swear, for 100 years, never change, end quote. Regarding the fate of those souls, one might speculate on where Chen Pingan's parents now reside. Even if Old Man Yang spoke the truth, that he did not interfere with them for fear the outside world would notice his suppression of Chen Pingan, there was another power at play. Mr. Qi, who had long favored his junior brother and was a master of the three teachings proficient in Buddhist Dharma, would surely have acted. Mr. Qi, who had dealings with Old Man Yang, the medicine Buddha of the lapis lazuli world, would undoubtedly have arranged a destination for their souls. Whether through reincarnation or some other path unnoticed by the prying eyes of the world, their spirits would not have simply dissipated into nothingness. Though the original chronicles do not explicitly mention it, it remains a point of deep reflection for those who follow his journey. The focus then shifts to the one known as Malinois, Wan Xiu remains as beautiful and sweet-spoken as ever. Though the heart sword mark on her person has faded by several degrees, a faint fire pattern still lingers. The fire dragon earring dangling by her ear, much like Li Lu's own mark, serves as a silent testament to Miss Xiuxiu's hidden identity. I took the liberty of bringing back your neighbor's chicks to raise as well, she says softly. But two of them were snatched away by wild cats, It is a concrete manifestation of the old saying, love the house and its crow, She takes care of everything related to Chen Pingan with a quiet, fierce devotion. It's fine, Chen Pingan replies. I'm a great hunter now. I'll make some stew for Miss Ruan later, This casual remark, the promise of a pot of soup, is enough to make Ruan Xiu happy for a long time. In a previous season, the boy had once offered her 3 fish but added, for the fish I catch next, I need to make soup for a friend's health. I can't give them to you anymore, Today, he is finally willing to make a pot of soup specifically for her, though the nature of the soup is fundamentally different from the one before. As Li Na once remarked, the pastries are delicious, but not as nourishing as fish soup, a comment that implies a choice already made by the hand of fate. Nearby, Xia Ling of Xiahai carries himself with the confidence of extraordinary talent and an impressive family background. Though he has yet to gain the support of another massive power in this moment, his character is revealed through his integrity. Later, upon learning of Chao Jun's actions toward Chen Pingan, he would not hesitate to question his own master, Wan Qiong. This innate kindness is perhaps one of the reasons he was granted such profound opportunities. What are you looking at? A voice barks. It is Jean Xian, issuing a warning. I'm warning you, Miss Xiuxiu is my master's old flame. If a blacksmith like you dares to have any crooked ideas, I'll punch you so hard your own father won and oppose. T recognize you, but his bravado is short-lived. Aya. Yes. Master is above. Please accept my humble kowtow, Lord Jean Xian possesses a divine eloquence, gift of the gab, that has mastered the essence of the town's peculiar folkways. His speed at changing faces rivals that of his master, promising brilliant, if unpredictable, performances in the days to come. As for Wan Qiong, his reasons for keeping his daughter away from Chen Pingan are simple. It is not a matter of looking down on the boy, but rather a fear of the overwhelming karma and celestial attention that surrounds him. Once Wan Xiu becomes deeply involved, her own uniqueness will inevitably be exploited by those with ulterior motives, a fate that contradicts Wan Qiong's desire for a peaceful life in the town. Yet, for Wan Xiu, the die was cast the moment she first saw Chen Pingan. Whether in the distant future of ascending to heaven, the trials at Shujian Lake, or a meeting at Huanjian Lake, their paths are destined to cross. Rather than overthinking the inevitable, one should look at the pure and beautiful moments of the present. Little girl, I didn't oppose. T know what to give you, Chen Pingan says to her. There are many delicious things outside, but they don't oppose. T keep for long. I had no other choice but to make this. Please don and oppose. T dislike. The phrase "mountains and rivers meet again" alludes to the ancient verses of Feng Minglong, "Mountains and rivers meet again, the spring breeze enters the scroll." I hope you take good care of yourself, with wine in the cup during the full moon, While the imagery is beautiful, the literal meaning conveys only the deep bond of friendship. The word yuan full/round, in the poem echoes the sui sui yuan, yearly completeness, seen in the water. Wan Shou, who can see into the depths of human hearts, observes him and whispers, nothing has changed. It's so good that nothing has changed, What remains unchanged is Chen cleanliness of spirit after traveling 10,000 miles, the purity of his state of mind, and his unwavering longing for Ningyao. Is it truly good for her? In a way, yes. The Chen she loves is defined by this very steadfastness. If he were a man who harbored wandering thoughts or disregarded his previous commitments, he would not be the man she loved. She loves his purity, even if that purity does not belong to her. She may be sad, but she is also sincerely happy for the man he is. The scene shifts to the Li family courtyard. A golden green crab, caught by Li Baoping using her own finger, is now being tended to by her eldest brother, Li Shixing. In the future, this crab and the mountain crossing chicken sent by Chen Pingon are destined to encounter a massive stroke of destiny. Li Shixing resides in a study named Jia Lu building a hut, an allusion to Tao Yuanming's famous poem, I built my hut in a realm of men, yet hear no noise of horse or carriage, The name reflects his detachment and ethereal state of mind. Yet, the poem's final line, in these things there is a fundamental truth. I would like to explain it, but have forgotten the words, hints at a specific, poignant end for a certain old gentleman yet to appear. Within the study, a porcelain puppet created by Cui Dongshan keeps a silent, watchful eye, a tool for surveillance. Mr. Li's right hand is stained with ink, the natural mark of a scholar. On his scroll, the figure of Chen Pingon appears vividly. It is not malice that drives his gaze, but the weight of the substituting one for another situation. He watches the boy to understand the cause and effect surrounding him, seeking a way to make amends. As Mr. Li himself says, now that you have returned from your travels, you are still Chen Pingon. That's good, He has been watching the boy since long before the journey to the academy. Finally, the Rao Liang vase, mentioned by Jean Xian, a name meaning lingering music, stands as a marvel capable of recording the world's sounds, from gurgling brooks to rolling thunder. Outside the Li residence, the gate is adorned with a couplet. The first line reads, secret mansion of green lotuses, where emperors forget their worries in a family banquet, The second line, modified for this telling, reads, auspicious sky hanging with white lilies, heavenly writings of 100 generations of dragon scripts, The lotus, perhaps corresponds to the lotus crown, of a Taoist great headmaster, much like the simplified crown upon Mr. Li's head. The white lily, mirrors the Buddhist, lotus world, These symbols highlight Mr. Li's status as the great headmaster of Baiyujing and his mastery of the three teachings. On the wall, the character Wu military stands, a character that can be split into G stop and go spear. To stop the spear is the essence of Wu a testament to the Li family's transcendent and peaceful status within the town. In this chapter of the unfolding saga, the character of Li Shixing is laid bare through his decision to stand up for Chen Pingon. It is here that the word wu, the essence of the martial, reveals itself not merely as a display of force, but as a reflection of a gentleman's profound integrity. A true scholar does more than pore over ancient texts. They must embody the responsibility and the indomitable spirit of a warrior. This duality is rooted in the Confucian classic, the Book of Documents, Councils of Great Yu, which speaks of being, both civil and martial, describing one who excels equally in the arts of letters and the strategies of war. In this world, such a description applies perfectly to Li Shixing. This sentiment corresponds deeply to his later words, where he quotes the poem He Xianlang, I see the green mountains as charming, and expect the green mountains to see me the same way, The author of those lines was not merely a man of letters, but the patriotic General Xian Qiji. Does such a man deserve to be called, both civil and martial, Without question. Yet, at this moment, the image of another scholar should be etched into the minds of all who witness these events. Insolent, the voice of the past seems to thunder. Be suppressed, If this were the man from 60 years ago, the first thing he would have done upon leaving his seclusion would be to trample Jiangyang Mountain flat with a single step. To those who dare to act like dogs lurking in the shadows, he issued a dire warning. If they dared such insolence again within the next 60 years, he would surely strip them of their cultivation and force them back into the state of mere mortals. The backlash of the heavenly Tao, accumulated from the town's 3,000 years of history, was a weight few could imagine. Yet he, Qi Jingchun, declared he would deflect it all with a single sword. Though the master is gone, it feels as if his presence has never truly left. Without overinterpreting the signs, the fact remains, Li Shixing and Mr. Qi are remarkably similar. Beyond the unity of the three teachings present in their respective Taos, one must remember that Mr. Qi taught in the town for 60 years. In that time, he surely must have taught Li Shixing as well. Even knowing that this scholar was backed by the Taoist lineage and that the world itself belonged to the Taoists, Mr. Qi, who upheld the principle of education for all without discrimination, would never have refused to pass on his knowledge. How could a scholar like Li Shixing not be influenced by such a man? After learning the full truth of his own origins and realizing that Qi Jingchun's unity of the three teachings had reached heights even further than his own, Li Shixing's admiration only grew. He saw a scholar who had sacrificed himself for the Tao, indirectly clearing a path for those who followed. Thus, Li Shixing chose to uphold Mr. Qi's final wish, May all things find their harmony, and all lives find their sustenance, He has already made his choice to act for the sake of this world. Looking again at the sentence, I see the green mountains as charming, and expect the green mountains to see me the same way, one finds layers of meaning. On the surface, it speaks of Li Shixing and Chen Pinggan recognizing each other as kindred spirits, as mountains standing tall. But it is also about the connection between Mr. Qi and Li Shixing, and how they and Chen Pinggan serve as each other's green mountains, It was because of Mr. Qi's sacrifice that Li Shixing and Chen Pinggan could become majestic and beautiful peaks, finally granted the chance to look upon one another. Schemes like substituting the plum for the peach or the machinations of those like Ma Kushuan ultimately pale before the choices made by the peach and plum themselves. Under Mr. Qi's lingering influence, the proverb holds true, the peach and plum do not speak, yet a path is formed beneath them, silently and unknowingly, so much was accomplished. In his final moment before passing, how could Mr. Qi not feel a sense of triumph? With Qi Jingchun having existed in this world, the world is a joy. He, too, was joyful. Yet, one cannot help but wonder, Master, you have done so much, are you not tired? Every word in this world possesses power, and the great Tao itself resides within them. The weight of words is a theme that will resonate throughout this season. Chen Pinggan, who took this lesson to heart, will one day stand atop the Great Wall of Sword Chi and use this understanding to complete a genuine word-refining process. Though that plot lies many seasons in the Chi were to use concepts like purity or non-action at his whim. The Taoist lineage, which relies on these as their very foundation, would see the world fall into complete chaos. Ma Xiaowan was clearly dissatisfied with Li Shixing's answer, perhaps limited by his own cultivation level. Yet, it is evident that the young fellow is at ease in his literary studies. It is no wonder he is destined to become the literary fire that captures the essence of heaven and earth. Among the 3 books Li Shixing gave to Chen Pingan were elementary texts like Xiao Shui. Before accepting them, Chen Pingan solemnly wiped his hands on his clothes, a gesture of profound respect for the books themselves, and respect for the friendship offered by Li Baoping's eldest brother. This mirrored the moment Li Shixing bowed and accepted a pheasant with both hands. In this, Chen Pingan and Li Shixing are truly each other's Green Mountains, this kind of deal. I accept, the decision is made. The deal itself was not extraordinary. It was merely one of the thousands of things Mr. Qi arranged. He sought to have Old Man Young help Chen Pingan leave the troubled town as soon as possible. Where he goes and what he does next is a story for the seasons to come. As for why the town became so dangerous, Chao Jun's attempt to snatch the sword embryo in this episode was merely a small fuse. Had Chen Pingan stayed, even more unimaginable calamities would have followed. The heavy-hearted youth, Chen Pingan, arrived at his doorstep and quickly gathered his emotions. Regardless of his parents' and Oppo's absence, he still had a home. This dilapidated little dwelling held every fragment of his parents' and Oppo's past, and the courtyard was the most precious treasure they had left him. Upon returning, his first act was to light 3 sticks of incense for his parents and Oppo's memorial tablets, the smoke rising steadily in the burner. As for the snake gallstones Chen Pingan gave to the 2 children, they were small in size but immense in value. The quality of such a stone is not measured by its bulk, but by the essence preserved within, reflected in the vibrancy of its color. Dull, faded stones are low-grade, but the bright red stone in Ma Xiaowan's hand and the dark blue one held by Gu Kan were of the highest quality. Chen Pingan gave them each 3 more high-quality stones. One child, unable to put them down, began to flatter him, while the other wept with sincere joy. It and Oppo's better to have a daughter, after all, one might joke. Come on, someone punch me to death, fine, came the reply. Li Huai's, manifestation of speech, power unexpectedly summoned a, listening, elder. Meanwhile, the, Chao family ancestral home, mentioned by Chao Jun was the very house where Chen Pingan had scammed old Yuan in the previous season. Wan Xiao had already helped renovate it, as mentioned in her letter to Chen Pingan. However, Chen Pingan did not use Wan Xiao as a shield. He understood that a man must take responsibility for his own actions. Since he had caused the damage to the ancestral home, he would face the consequences. But for Chao Jun, the ancestral home was a mere pretext. He was eyeing the sword embryo gifted by the mountain-shattering great minister, which had yet to recognize a master. The fox on Chao Jun's shoulder was the sister of the infant spirit seen with old Master Bai. Though Chao Jun appeared young, he was over 100 years old and a top-tier sword immortal candidate from Wanbo Island, having reached the golden core stage in just decades. Since a sword cultivator's power is typically a level above their peers, he possessed the strength of a nascent soul cultivator. However, his sword heart had once been shattered by a casual strike from a man named Zua, leaving his Dao heart in ruins. Currently, his realm hovered between the 8th and 9th levels, half-baked golden core. Despite this, his talent for the sword Dao was undeniable. This was why the sword embryo on Chen Pingan's person hungrily sought to, leave the darkness for the light, end quote, preferring Chao Jun over Chen Pingan, whose bridge to longevity was broken. The sword embryo's arrogance was palpable, a trait that would persist even after it eventually became a natal flying sword. But there was no rush. The youth's path of sword refining was always meant to be rough. Only by weathering such storms can one eventually view the sea of clouds from the highest vantage point. Li Shixing's arrival to save the day on that spring night was strikingly similar to the manifestation of Mr. Qi's powers. And quote, "The books I gave you have many of my annotations and questions," end quote, Li Shixing told Chen Pingan. And quote, "If you can avoid reading them, then don and oppose, lest they cause you to misinterpret the original meaning," end quote. And quote, "I and oppose, keep that in mind," end quote, Chen Pingan replied. On the surface, Li Shixing feared his own high and distant Tao would lead Chen Pingan astray from his own instinctive understanding. It recalled Mr. Qi's words, end quote, "Principles are all found in books, but being a person happens outside of them," end quote. One must verify principles through action to see if they truly fit. Both scholars were using the same wisdom to guide a future peer. As for the end quote, Chao Shi end quote, mentioned by Li Shixing, his background was even more significant. Once called a end quote, brat end quote, by the dragon Jigue for urinating into the dragon-locking well, he had since transformed into a terrestrial sword immortal and a true lord of a nation. The purpose of his and his grandson Chao Jun's return to Longquan would soon be revealed, explaining why this old figure holds such a place in the hearts of many. The battle between Li Shixing and Chao Jun was a masterclass in technique. Li Shixing, using only a 6th-level cultivation, created a small Confucian saint's domain to protect the neighbors from the fallout. Supplemented by yin-yang divination, he predicted every weakness in Chao Jun's assault. He moved with the Buddhist end quote, step-by-step lotus end quote, footwork and used the Taoist end quote, sleeve universe end quote, to suppress the sword end quote, white fish end quote. He commanded the 5 elements, lava from fire, vines from wood, boulders from earth, floods from water, and a cloud of swords from metal. With talisman techniques reminiscent of the celestial masters, gold for offense, blue for protection, he integrated 10,000 techniques to neutralize Chao Jun's end quote, one sword, 10,000 laws, end quote. Such power truly earned the praise of being at the level of the end quote, ancestors of the 3 teachings end quote, or a end quote, banished immortal reincarnated end quote. Finally, Cai Jinjian arrived at Daoxian Mountain to meet Ningyao. She remained alive only because of Mr. Qi's mercy. He had seen a sliver of kindness in her heart when she had been manipulated by Lu Jimao, and he chose to give her a chance to start over. Her future path would continue to involve Mr. Qi, who, despite his omnipotence, would even ask her for advice on things he did not understand. Cai Jinjian's mission was to deliver a landscape painting scroll. The events within that scroll would soon correspond with Chen Pingan's struggle to subdue the arrogant sword embryo. The youth who was once a end quote, wealth-bringing boy end quote, the youth who endured for 14 years, was about to firmly grasp what belonged to him and strike a blow for his own destiny. The mountains are high and the road is long. The journey continues.